Thank you, the one clapper here. Thank you very much. All right, friends, welcome to VIP Day of Build Show Live. This is the small group setting, and I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for taking the time out of your families, out of your businesses, for taking the time to come today and be here. This is a really small group. We've got a select few of you here, and you guys paid, frankly, a lot of money to be here. We're really thankful that you guys were willing to take the time and the money to be here. We've got an amazing morning program. I'm about to introduce Brent Hull, who's going to spend the majority of our teaching time this morning. But also, this afternoon is really unique. This is the only trade show I've ever seen or ever known of that does job site tours. And this is a really big deal to get on a Hull Homes, Hull Millwork job. And we've got a second job site right here in town that Peter Scott is going to host us, second generation local builder. And we're really going to see two very opposite houses. We're going to see brand new construction, and we're going to see very, very old, very deep craftsmanship being rebuilt into a new house. And I think there's some really interesting lessons for us as builders, as remodelers, as industry insiders to learn from both of these projects. But I want to take a second to introduce Brent Hull for you. If you don't know Brent Hull, I suspect many of you are here only because of Brent Hull and to see Brent Hull speak. But if for some reason you don't know Brent, I want to go back in time a little bit and rewind to tell you about my first time meeting Brent. The very first time I heard his name was actually on my TV set in my living room when he had this series called Lone Star Restoration, Lone Star Rising. I'm probably butchering it, Brent. But he did a full season of Discovery Channel show where Brent would go do these crazy restoration projects. And it was interesting, like he did some amazing houses, but he also did like a train car and a boat, maybe, something, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm surprised to see Brent doing a boat or a train car. But I was like, man, this guy's incredible, and he's only up in Fort Worth. And I'm not from Texas, but I'm married a Texan, and I've been here 20 years now, so I feel like I am a Texan. So this was, I don't know, a decade ago. Turns out my wife's cousin had done a project with Brent, had taken this 1930s house that was really well built 100 years ago, had used Brent's company for a big restoration project, and I visited the house and was blown away by the craftsmanship. Just the house looked like a stunner, like it had been transported in time to 2015, even though it was built, almost 100 years ago. It looked absolutely magnificent, and with craftsmanship that's very unlike what I was used to seeing in Texas in the first 5 or 10 years I worked here. So I actually don't remember the very first time I met Brent, but I do remember our initial conversations about shooting videos in the Build Show, which was, 6, 7 years ago. I said, Brent, I don't know if we can afford you, but we'd like to pay you around $20 to make a video for us. Would that work for you? And he said, Matt, what's interesting is when I worked at Discovery, it was really frustrating to me because I'm a teacher by heart, and I really want to teach people to be passionate about craftsmanship and about building things well. And when I was shooting for the networks for like Discovery Channel, they wanted drama. They wanted a homeowner who was crying in the episode. They wanted all these things that were contrary to what I wanted to teach people. Like, I have all this great knowledge that I've learned over the years, and I want to bring that to the public. And when I make a video for HGTV, or not Discovery, but I'll also lump those guys in too, there's a whole different set of values that they're looking for than what I'm looking for. And so Brent was on board from the beginning. In fact, Brent and me and Wade and Jake and Steve, am I missing anybody? We're the original Build Show Network contributors, making videos, talking about things we were passionate about. And I think one of the big reasons Brent was on board with that was because he had full rights to edit and make sure the video really met his requirements. And so that being said, we've been together 5 years now in the Build Show Network. Come on up, Brent. The most incredible craftsman you'll ever meet. I mean, Brent is the picture of craftsmanship and integrity. And we also have Brent's 100-year window that we'll talk about a little bit later on stage. So feel free to come back up and touch and feel this product that you're going to see on the job site a little bit later. But Brent, I can't thank you enough for your leadership, my friend.
Thanks, buddy.
I think it is Master Builder University time, and this is your clicker for your slides.
Okay.
All right, guys, big round of applause for Brent Hull.
Thanks, Matt. Those are some memories, not always good memories. It was the History Channel, not Discovery. That didn't make a difference. It was still a nightmare. I think it's awesome listening to Jake and Steve, Jake and Matt, talk about the problems, right, that they went through, their mistakes, showing humility, showing their perspective, sharing the things they've done to fix it. So this talk is a little bit Brent sharing his perspective. Shout out to a couple North Bennett Street teachers here, Brock and Pete. That's the school I went to in Boston 30 plus years ago, a program called Preservation Carpentry. What happened was I went there and the first thing we learned to do is take old hand tools and get them working again. It was some museum quality, historic preservation. If you're going to build a door from the 1820s, you need to know how to use hand tools to do it. And so this training, this perspective was really, we were learning how things were built 250 years ago. And so, I remember going to job sites, we were restoring a barn, doing stuff like that, and then driving back through a new development going, okay, time warp, what's happened, here's the way we used to build, here's the way we're building today. And that was my training, that was my background. 30 years later, I have this company and I have this vision for what builders should be, okay? And we'll talk about that. And so this talk is a hour and a half version of a 2-day conference. So it's a lot of information. It's some of me ranting about crap, and it's some of me just sharing opportunity. And really that's what this talk is. I think that because of the way things are being built today, there is an opportunity for incredible craftsmanship, incredible beauty, getting back to the way I believe we used to build. And I'm going to show you kind of how, why things changed. Okay, what happened? Why are there McMansions in the 80s? What happened? So I'll explain. So here we go. I want to start with a guy named Palladio, okay, because he is the model for what buildings should be and what builders should be. Palladio is a Renaissance stonemason, okay, so 1500s. He was working on a stonemason's crew. Figure if he was in America, he would have been a framer or a trim carpenter. He was building houses, okay? He goes on one of his jobs to a project where this kind of wealthy patron, guy named Trissino, sees him, and something happened on the job site. Something happened that ingratiated Palladio to Trissino, and Trissino said, you know what, I like that kid. He's smart. What did he do? I don't know, but he did something that attracted Trissino's eye, and Trissino's like, you need to come work for me. You're going to come and I'm going to train you up, okay? Remember, this is the Renaissance, so this is the time of relearning, rebirth, all this stuff going on. And so he goes and begins to teach Palladio. Palladio goes on to write the 4 books of architecture, which is kind of the most famous architecture book ever, okay? Today, Palladio is considered an architect, but he was just like us, okay? He was a guy who knew how to craft, he was a guy who knew how to build, and he fell in love with the past, and we're gonna kind of talk about that. This is the Roman Forum, okay? As an artist's conception of what they think it looked like in Rome, okay? This is what the Forum looks like today. And this is what it looked like around Palladio's time, okay? In the Renaissance, they're coming back and looking at Rome going, who were these people what is going on? Like, what are these columns? What is this idea? At the same time, there's a book, they're rediscovering the past. Remember the Renaissance, this rebirth. They're rediscovering the past, and the book comes out from the ancient Greek and Roman world by Vitruvius called the 10 Books of Architecture. And in it, it's the only book of architecture that we have from the Greek and Roman world, from the classical world. And he starts talking about proportions. He starts talking about the orders of architecture, the gender of architecture, perfect proportions, the golden ratio, all of these ideas that the Renaissance guys are like, what in the world is going on? What's he talking about? No pictures in the book, right? It's Vitruvius' book with no pictures. Leonardo da Vinci falls in love with this thing, the whole golden ratio. If you look at, if you Google, what's her famous picture, the one he drew, the lady? Mona Lisa. Oh yeah, that one. I got too many thoughts in my head. The golden ratio is all in her face, and all his paintings and pictures have this golden ratio. So he was in love with this thing, and he talks about how the golden ratio is in your finger to your hand to your elbow, that there's all these proportions going on there. So they're falling in love with this. Palladio does 4 or 5 trips to Rome, and one of these trips he's sitting there going, okay, wait. And he starts measuring the buildings, and he starts figuring out these proportions and figuring out kind of what was going on. And you got to realize that the Roman world was an astonishing place for them. Okay, realize that the Pantheon, okay, in Rome. Anybody been to Pantheon in Rome? Nice. Thank you, Steve. It's amazing. And here's what happened, okay? That self-supporting dome, okay, in the Pantheon blew people away. They're like, how are they doing that? Realize that when, in Florence, when Fibonacci, I'm gonna get all these names screwed up. He does this dome. It's the first time in 1,000 years they built a self-supporting dome. And it's not, we're looking at the past, even in the Renaissance, even into the classical era, saying, how did they do that? So that's the astonishment that was going on, that they were looking back at this classical world going, who were these people? How did they do it, okay? Palladio is kind of a nobody, right? He is working in a place called Vicentia, okay? Vicentia is outside of Venice. Venice had been this, incredible, powerful town because of all the trade going down to the east. That's how people got there. But when people started sailing around the Horn of Africa, they're no longer going through Venice, and so these Venetians were saying, well, we're going to go buy farmland out here, and we're going to start building these houses. And that's where Vicentia is, outside of Venice, about an hour's drive, and they start building these houses. And Palladio is building for these wealthy patrons, okay? And basically, Palladio creates a new house style, okay? The country house, this farmhouse. And on the lower level of this house is the working area. So all those arches down there, that's all kind of working farmland, working farm thing. You had sheep and goats and hay and all the different things that you need for working a farm, okay? Working that was on this first level. And then on the second level, that piano nobile, that upper level was very formal, was a wonderful house and wonderful place to live. And so you're separated from the working area, but you had this wonderful house. On top of that, he now has taken what he's learned by studying the ancient buildings of Rome and begun to apply them to the architecture of these houses. That's why you got that temple front on the front of this thing. And studying his buildings, you see all these proportions that he has put into these rooms. So much so that the main room might be a golden rectangle, and then the room to the right might be a proportion of that broken out, so they all related to one another. And you can study that for a long period of time, all his houses and all of his things. And this arrangement of that kind of outbuilding, little wing, main building, wing, and then outbuilding is a pattern that you'll see. It's Palladian, okay? And it's kind of how he puts these houses together. You've heard of the Villa Rotunda, the famous house in Venice. It influences the English, okay? And so Lord Burlington did Chiswick House. This is in London, where he was basically looking at Palladio saying, yes, that's the pattern, that's what we need to do. He actually did with Isaac Ware, he did did the first English interpretation of Palladio's book. realize, guys, that Palladio blew everybody's doors off and no one could get enough of him. Our president, Thomas Jefferson, Monticello is a little bit Villa Rotunda-y, okay? Thomas Jefferson talks about Palladio, said, Palladio was my Bible, okay? And we learned that Jefferson was quite the architect and quite the designer. He had 4 copies of Palladio's book. He had a little small copy that was this big that he could carry around with him. It was very influential. The English country house and the way these things are laid out, all Palladian. You come over to America, this is Drayton Hall in South Carolina. Palladian in its manner, and they've realized now that there was actually these wing walls and these outbuildings. And so, you look at Mount Vernon, its little wings and its little side pieces, and even the White House, okay? So Palladio was incredibly influential, but I always remind myself, he was the stonemason, right? He was the guy who knew how to craft, who traveled, who looked around, started seeing things, was inspired by great design, was a learner, was a publisher, was writing, was sharing. He is the model for what I would like this master builder idea to be, right? I want us, okay? I want builders to be architects. I want architects to be builders. I do not think there should be a separation between these two because building is too important and it matters too much. I don't know what that slide is. Oh, got to push the button again. The word architect is master builder, okay? Did you know that? Arca is that chief or main, like the architrave is the beam that goes across an opening, and then tech is about building. So even the word master builder is architect. We should be using those things together. And then my idea for Master Builder University is that in order to build well today, okay, we have to understand the past, and that's that kind of classicism that we're going to hop into here in a second. And then along with that, historic precedent. So understanding the past, as well as this classical ideal, will help us to start building better, more beautifully. The American version of Palladio is a guy named William Buckland. Okay, he was in Virginia. There's a rich guy in Virginia who's building a great house. And he says to his brother who's over in England, he goes, find me a builder. Find me a craftsman who knows how to build well. Now, that speaks to the number of skilled tradesmen, skilled builders in America. They were few and far between, okay? There just weren't a lot. There was a bunch in Philadelphia. There was a few in Virginia. Up in Boston, you could find some. But there weren't a lot of master builders in America in the 1740s, 1750s. Buckland actually apprenticed and trained in England, okay? So he went through the 12-year program of becoming an apprentice, becoming a master builder, and he ends up moving to Virginia. He actually was basically he got paid to come over here and then paid a salary to build this house, Gunston Hall, okay, in Virginia. It's kind of a master class in what was going on in England, what he was learning, what he had seen there, and then putting this house together in America for this guy, finishing this house out. It's thought that the house might have had its foundation or had its walls up, but hadn't been finished out. And so you see a room like this, incredible carvings, the niches, the organization, okay, this central Georgian piece with the 2 side wings. He actually introduced chinoiserie, okay, that's a Chinese influence or a Chinese thing that was going on. And so he builds a room with chinoiserie, which is incredibly forward thinking. It's incredibly relevant for him to be able to do this Chinese room in Virginia. He goes on to Annapolis. He builds a house called the Hammond Hardwood House. Again, notice the Palladian layout where you've got this central bay, the little wings and the side things. And then this doorway, okay, that Thomas Jefferson says is the most beautiful doorway in America. He had seen in an Abraham Swan pattern book and copied and inspired and did that. So the idea, guys, is, hopefully you're here because you want to be a master builder. What does that even mean? What does that look like? That's what we're going to kind of talk about and look at today. We're going to jump into the classical design. I'm going to spend about 15, 20 minutes on these classical ideas, and then we're going to spend majority of the time on historic precedent and the history of building, kind of how we got here and what's going on. So, a master builder today, okay, this is Brent's definition, okay, that doesn't mean this is the only way of doing it, but I believe the best builders are builders who actually know how to craft, okay? I think the best builders actually know, we're trim carpenters, we're framers, we're something, and have experience building cabinetry or something. They have to, I think, Brent thinks that there has to be an ability to craft, an ability to do stuff like that. I think there is a seasoning that has to take place to become a master builder. I don't think you can be building for 5 years and be a master builder. I don't think there's any precedent of any of the heroes that I look back on, Asher Benjamin, Samuel McIntyre, any of these guys who built for 5 years and were a master. And I know there's builders out there who claim they're master builders, and I guarantee you they're probably not. I think the year is you have to be building for at least 15 to 20 years before you can have experienced the things. And like Jake and Matt were up here talking, you have to have some war stories. You have to have some scars. You have to have gone through some things to learn some stuff. That's the seasoning, I think, that has to happen in order to be a master. And then you have to understand design. I think that's where that architect and builder come together. And understanding design is not being able to read blueprints, okay? Understanding design is not, well, I know CAD, okay? Understanding design, as you'll see, we go and jump into this classical thing, is more than that. Okay, so the classical design, how's this help? Okay, what is this system? Essentially, we're talking about the 5 orders of architecture, Doric, Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, Composite. They're essentially proportioning systems. They're essentially ways that the Greeks and Romans looked at the universe and said, how are we going to design our buildings? How are we going to put these things together? And they came up with these proportioning systems, or ways of putting buildings together, ideas, philosophies that help design come together, okay? So it's a practiced and traditional way of building. It's things that were practiced. Everything pre-1940 was classically based, okay? And we'll get into more of that. If you want to have conversations with the designers and architects and homeowners about scale and proportion, about hierarchy, molding size, molding placement, all of that comes from this classical tradition. It's very important. This little slide here talks about there's the mathematical and philosophical ways of thinking about the system. There's this idea called punctuation. And punctuation is that the idea is that the door casing should punctuate an opening. And in order to do that, there is a mathematical relationship of about 1 to 5, maybe 1 to 7, depending on which area you're in, that you need on a door casing in order to punctuate that opening. So if you figure, if it's 1 to 8, which is what they did in the federal period, you got a 36-inch wide opening, you've got about a 4.5-inch casing, okay? That means, guys, and that's about as small as they get in that classical era. You go to the Georgian era, it's like 6.5 inches door casing width to punctuate it. That means a little 2-inch clamshell is not going to punctuate that opening, okay? And we need to kind of reset our minds about what molding sizes and shapes and placement should be. The organization of classical rooms and classical things was, the classical system defined these spaces, okay? This is a 1760s house in London, Robert Adam did, but look what's going on here, okay? And if you understand the classical system, there's a pedestal with a wainscot that's tied to it. There is a column that's kind of the body of the wall. There's an entablature that wraps around that room. There is order and symmetry as far as the balance of the door openings. There's full door headers over that mantle and over those doors. This classical system is lays all that out, okay, and allows this thing to come together and organized in a way that's beautiful. But you look at most rooms pre, 1900, even pre-1920, and they're laid out classically, and we'll go into that. These are the 5 orders of architecture, in case you didn't know the different size and scale of those. Essentially, the idea is that the classical orders are based on the human body, okay? The Tuscan or Doric order have a ratio of 1 to 7. Now, why is that? Well, if you took my foot and measured it, it's 11 inches long. I'm 76 inches tall, right? See, if I was 77 inches tall, it'd be 1 to 7. I'm 1 inch from being perfect. Ask my wife. Don't ask my wife. But it was based on this human scale, okay? It's based on this proportion that my body, my hands are proportionate to my body, my head, my ears, all the parts and pieces are proportionate to this body. And so what they did was they said, well, there's a diameter of 1, okay, which is the width, just say, of your foot, and then you flip that up and you do 7 things on 1 to 7 relationship. The ionic scale is based on the female body, and that's a 1 to 8 relationship, okay? So each of these things have this proportion or this system of putting this thing together. I don't know if you guys have seen the golden rectangle and know what that is, but basically it's a 3 to 5 relationship, which works out to 1.618, this irrational number that doesn't end. Some people call it the God number. But if I take that rectangle and I make a square there on the left, I create another golden rectangle on the right, okay? If I make another square, I create this other golden rectangle. And essentially what I'm doing is, if I add it to itself or multiply or divide it by itself, I still end up with that same proportion. So it's kind of unique that way. And you see the nautilus shell. If I kind of spiraled out from the middle of that, you would see this nautilus shell shape. And this is what the Greeks and the Romans saw in nature and in the human body, these proportions, and that they wanted to copy. That's a piece of cabbage that I cut there. You can see the spiraling nautilus shell shape there. And then if you get into the Fibonacci sequence, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, which are adding to itself, and you create these numbers, you have 8 by 8, 13 by 13, 21 by 21, right? So there's a mathematical thing that's going on here that makes it appealing, makes it beautiful, based on the human scale. And if we look at the Parthenon and we kind of put the roof back on, it too follows this golden ratio where that proportioning system ends up defining the height of that entablature, the width between the columns, the height of the pediment. There is just organization there, guys, that if you've been into an old house or been into a historic room and go, I don't know why I like it, but I like it, that's kind of that, there's a human scale, there's an order of how that's been put together that makes it appealing and draws us to it. And that's where you get into this proportion and scale, and how do you know when it's done well? Depending whether you're, even if you're very small in a huge space or very, larger in a smaller space, you can still feel those proportions and still feel that scale, and it works. There is deep dives you can do into all of this, guys. Serlio, who is a Renaissance pattern book author, just the organization and just the thought that goes into a door opening, okay? And do you see that proportion of that overall square, and that they're doing crossing lines, and then you divide it in half and do another set of lines called regulating lines, okay? And there's a book called The Old Way of Seeing, if you've read that book. He talks about regulating lines on historic buildings and what happened to buildings that we no longer have the regulating lines. But there is an organization that when you look at it and go, gosh, this is really beautiful, I'm not sure I understand what's going on, you'll sometimes see those regulating lines and that kind of detail, organizing it and pulling it together. So you can get deep deep dive into this thing, and you don't run out of run room here. This is a guy, Richard Sammons in Fairfax, great architect, classical architect in Miami. Look what they did with this wall, okay? Look what they did with this room. And what you're looking at is the cornice on the left, the wainscot on the right, and then actually an architrave, a door casing on the far right. And look how the organization of that wall, okay, and the breakup, the punctuation that's happening, the golden ratio that's going on there, and how it relates. Just go to the far right in that door casing, that the tinea, the back part of that door casing, relates to the pedestal height, and then the body, and then the height there. That there is an organization that's taking place, which is fascinating and beautiful, and you probably didn't realize you could dive this deep into a wall and realize that how all the parts come together and how that organization works. It's awesome. Again, I'm showing you some of the stuff we do at Master Builder, but that thing on the far left, the layout of the Tuscan order, okay? What it says there on the left, the far left, is that you can break out that room into 19 parts, okay? And by understanding the size of those parts, you can then establish your chair rail height, and there's a reason why. I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. I always say that the chair rail should never be 36 inches. And this is why, right? Because the pedestal height of the room and the layout of the room means that the pedestal is much smaller than that. In fact, in a 10-foot room, according to these rules, the pedestal is about 25 inches, okay? And people are like, 25 inches, that's so low. Okay, we're not going to go there. You're going to walk into that house today, and they've got a high chair rail, and I'm going to eat crow for about the next day and a half because of it. And we can talk about why that's done, but I'm laying the cards out that we're about to see that. Matt actually gave me a hard time. He was over there going to go, hey, what's going on here? Shut up, Matt. Anyway, you can break out the wall, you can break out all these parts and pieces according to this system, okay? And you can get deep into the math, and I teach guys that come to the thing, don't do that, because I think your eye can see it well enough. But what that other slide is showing, the Tuscan order broken out there, is that each of those different parts of the order, okay, look at the base there, and can't read it, I don't know if you can read it. It says 1/2 D, okay? Or you go up to the architrave and it says 1/2 D or 2D, whatever. Everything is based on that diameter at the base of the column. So if you go into these orders, they are broken out this way, so even the little astragal, the neck or where that place is all related, okay, to this D. And so that gets into the beauty of the system where just like the human body, all the parts and pieces are related. Same is true with our buildings, so that, you know, the moldings in our space should be related to the overall whole, and you can get down to that kind of detail. Last thing on the classical system is these systems and this order comes from, it's thought, original wood buildings. And so if you look at, you know, this here, which is the Doric order, triglyphs, okay, which are kind of the square thing, are meant to replicate the beam as it comes through and is supporting the ceiling. And the mutual to the above that's coming down is meant to be the rafter tail as it comes in there. And so Mary Casado, if you want to get into this book, her book, Get Your House Right, is probably one of the best books out there as far as explaining a lot of these ideas. She's showing that in the Doric order, okay, all of this comes from wood, and even the molding at the top, which is supposed to be the gutter, the cimation, is all part of this system. So I try to teach guys the vocabulary of triglyphs and guttae and all this different stuff. It is archaic, it is weird, but it does come from a building tradition that I think we all understand. Last thing is this moldings, okay? And I did one of my videos was why I never use a molding designed after 1950, because it's crap. Don't do it. Don't look at those. The reason why is that if you look at the classical system, The shapes that should be used to define a molding, okay, are very simple, okay? There's flat spaces, there's flat ones, there's convex, there's concave, and there's complex, okay? So the cyma recta, the cove, the fillet, okay? All of these things are very simple. There's your palette for how to make moldings, okay? It's not these bumps and bruises that show up on moldings and crown today. And the irony is that it's hard to get a door casing big enough to follow the classical system, and it's hard to get a crown small enough to follow the classical system. So the whole thing's kind of messed up today as far as how we put moldings together. Did you know that moldings actually have purpose? That there are supporting moldings that support like this, and then there's terminating moldings that, ta-da, right? That they have, where we place them in the room communicates an idea and how things are ordered, okay? There is this idea of hierarchy, okay? That moldings communicate, that there is a language, and this is how we speak, and that you walk into a main hall, okay, the entry of a house, and the hierarchy of those moldings says, oh yeah, look, I'm in an important space. And look, that doorway over there is really big and it's inviting me in there. I'm going to go that way. And there's a closet door over there and all it has is a very small molding. Yeah, I'm probably not supposed to go that way. That the dining room is then elevated kind of at a mid-level, but a bedroom upstairs. And those three walls, okay, are all the same. There's a door in the middle. There's two windows on either side. They're the exact same size. Only with moldings have I changed how you think about those spaces. Have I communicated where you're supposed to be and where you're supposed to go, all using moldings. So there's a real power there, guys. And I want you guys to get good so that this is a 1976 house, kind of not a very good house, and I didn't do anything to that space except change the moldings, okay? I didn't raise the height of it. All I did was bigger base, punctuated door opening, a door header, okay, and a crown, okay, and a chair rail, right? All I did was change the moldings, and there's power here, power for us to be able to use this classical system to build things better, to build things more beautifully, if we understand kind of how it all goes together. And realize that the classical system is we don't understand it anymore, okay? And this is a good example of that. Unfortunately, keystones, pediments, columns have become stickers, okay, that we apply to the face of our building. Say, I need something traditional, let me put a pediment up there. Or I need something classical, let me put a column up there, right? And we've forgotten it, and this is the lost art of building I'm always talking about, that we've forgotten how to build, we've forgotten how to use these things in a beautiful way. Porches are a great example. We screw up porches all the time. So, if you want to, understand keystones, did you know the keystones actually are broken out and mathematically figured out as far as what size they should be, where they should go, what they should look like? That columns, just said we'd screw up columns. People don't know how to build pediments anymore, the molding placement. All of these things are tools that you guys can use to make your jobs better if you understood how to put this all together. Okay, any questions about classical before I go to historic precedent? Wearing you down. Historic precedent. Okay, here's why it matters. Here's why it's important. And this is me going to rant here for the next 45 minutes on the history of building, okay, that I think we all should understand and know, and then what happened to building to have us start doing McMansions and building all that kind of stuff. Okay. We show you 5 porches, 5 entries, okay? The one on the left is a Georgian entry. That's the Hammond Hardwood house that we talked about, William Buckland, okay? That to the door, the right is a Federal opening, okay? That is about 40 years later. Then you've got a Greek Revival, another 40 years. You've got to notice the columns have no base. And then you've got a Victorian, about another 40 years, 50 years. Those columns are square, okay? And that entablature, has brackets. It's very different and weird. Arts and crafts, you got tapered columns, and you got these long piers with these little short columns at the top. What's going on, okay? This is why historic precedent matters, because historic precedent helps you realize that with each age of building, design changes, the way we perceive things, the way we put things together changes based on current philosophies and current way of things and current influences, so that all 5 of these columns are columns. They're all porches, but they're expressed and described very differently. And the reason, the Brent Hull way of building, the way I talk about building with clients, is I talk about a narrative, and I talk about what story you want to do. What is our story? Who built the house? When was the house built? We did a farmhouse for a lady in Missouri, and she wanted a traditional house. I go, when do you want it built? She goes, well, what does that mean? I go, well, if it's in 1900s, it's going to be kind of neoclassical. If it's 1870, it's probably going to be Victorian, and there's going to be scrolls and brackets on it. If it's 1820s, then it's going to be more rustic, and the materials are going to be different. The hardware is going to be different. Everything is going to be different based on when we decide this thing's going to be built. And then I even go farther. I say, well, who built it? Did the farmer build it, or did they hire someone to come in and build it? In other words, what kind of materials? How sophisticated is this going to be, right? So there's a narrative to building, and in order to build beautifully, the best houses, in my opinion, were houses that have a story that you can walk in and go, oh, look what they did here. Look what is going on there. And you learn more about it. It becomes this layering of the house. It goes, oh, I love this because I've been back here 5 times, and each time I see something different. That's what we're trying to do for our clients. But this classicism, which is all good pre-1940s, okay, kind of falls apart today, okay? And this is where the kind of lost art of building. We've forgotten how to build porches. We've forgotten how to put things together. These columns now sit up right up under the eave, and they don't know how to do the pediment. They don't understand the split fillet. The pedestals are too high. The bank is ugly. Those parts and pieces aren't in the right place. It's a mess, okay? So, the way I want to break this out is I'm going to talk about kind of pre-industrial, post-industrial, and then post-World War II, because those are the eras where everything really changes. This first era is really Georgian, 1740 to end of Greek Revival, 1840, 1850, these different styles. The Georgian period is named after King George, okay, who was the English king. We weren't a free country yet. This is Mount Airy. Notice what style it is. Palladian, right? You've got that main body, you got the wings and this thing on the side. There's Gunston Hall where William Buckland worked, 1740s. Everybody been to Colonial Williamsburg? Oh, come on, guys. Yeah, that is a candy land of beauty and wonder. It's meant to be a Georgian village, okay, Georgian capital for Virginia at that time, and it's wonderful details, wonderful craftsmanship. I highly encourage you to go there. Few civic buildings in this period, like obviously Philadelphia Hall and Carpenter's Hall, are examples of the kind of things that have been built at that time. You're looking at buildings and styles that are very symmetrical. You got this balance in these 5-bay option here with that kind of front porch. Even on the interior, you see that kind of organization where you've got the central fireplace and the 2 wings on either side. Symmetry, big deal in this period, and big deal of how they put all that together. You know that you've got this Georgian look when you've got these big, strong moldings and big, bold details. There's Drayton Hall again. As we go into the federal period, so now we're after the American Revolution, we're 1780 to about 1820. Okay, this is what's called neoclassical. There was an architect in England named Robert Adam, and he was actually defining and helped rediscover these classical ideals, and we call it neoclassicism. I showed you one of his rooms there. This is another wall from that room. The style changes, so it's not as big and heavy and bold. It's much more dainty and light. Basically what happened is that they discovered Pompeii, okay? So the king of Naples was actually excavating and discovered Pompeii and goes, oh my gosh, this was the Roman town that got covered in ash, and everything was untouched for 2,000 years. And they go and they excavate and they look at Pompeii and they go, well, this is very different than I thought we were going to do. So what they had been doing is they've been designing buildings based on the exterior of these Roman villas and Roman buildings, and they realized that the way Romans really lived was was much less decoration, and moldings became softer, lighter, not nearly as heavy, and you had all this crazy decoration. This is in Maryland, but fan lights, the leaded glass, that became very popular at this time. Lighter, daintier details, columns and pilasters, much smaller. The colors and the palette, because of what they saw in Pompeii, these reds and pinks and blues, all these different colors that they hadn't really thought the Romans had been using, they had. But you still see the symmetry, right? You still see that central fireplace, the two wings on the other side. Anytime you see decoration like that over the door with swags and urns and different kind of Roman and Pompeian motifs and decoration, you're in that federal period. Then Greek Revival, 1820 to about 1860. The Americans basically fell in love with Greek Revival because it reinforced these democratic ideals that we had begun to adopt. So remember, America, we win the war in 1780. We have another war in 1812. 1820 comes around and we're like, you know what, this might work. And realize how radically different our government was compared to the other monarchies and stuff. And look what the revolutions were going on. I mean, the French Revolution happened. They cut off Louis XVI's head, right? There was a huge amount of change going on. Greece was trying to get its independence from the Ottoman Turks. And so we look at it and go, well, they were the first democratic society. We actually want to copy that. So we renaming our towns, Athens and Sparta and Troy, all of these different things. The American people fell in love with Greek Revival and began to build these kind of temple front things that mimic the Parthenon and the Pantheon, and these classical buildings, trying to put them back together. And so Second Bank of Philadelphia there, basically a copy of the Parthenon. This kind of temple front that you see, there's a house in Nashville. You know when you see Greek Revival, you have a huge, strong entablature that goes across the top. You have columns. Oftentimes they don't have a base. They go right down to the floor. But these are Greek Revival details. The palmetto kind of decoration there, the Ionic column. Very different the way these rooms are put together. Mantles are different. And if you compare like three kind of little niches, there's a Georgian, there's a Federal, and there's a Greek Revival. And this is that historic precedent that client says to you, I want a Greek Revival thing. I want you to know what Greek Revival is. I want you to know what that looks like. Same thing with mantles. In the Georgian period, you'd have an overmantle. The Federal period, you really wouldn't. And then the Greek, it just becomes very plain, very stone-like, because we're trying to mimic that Greek temple, so our moldings become very strong and big and tall, mimicking that stone-like look. So this is the last of that pre-industrial, okay, where everything's handmade and everything is handcrafted, right? Two kind of building techniques I want you to understand and appreciate kind of what was going on. One is masonry, okay? Masonry pre-industrial is all handmade, okay? And they would make a kiln and they would fire bricks, and some bricks didn't get fired very well, and so they were soft. Some bricks were hard and brittle, and they actually laid bricks out on a wall when they built a solid masonry wall with the cheaper, less strong bricks in the middle. The bricks that were really soft, they'd actually make into molded bricks, and so there was an art to how they were putting these rooms together. And because almost everything made by brick was solid masonry, in fact, the house we're going to see today, kind of early 1900s, best houses in Fort Worth were solid masonry. And this is one of them. So there are no studs in the wall. It's, about 16 inches thick, solid masonry wall with structural clay tile. But one of the things they did at that period in this time, one of the magic things we've lost is the coursing, okay? And what's called bonding patterns. And bonding patterns are because the wall is 3 widths thick, and you can kind of see it there on the right, you had to bond the 3 walls together. And so you'd end up with headers that were bonded back into the wall, tying everything together, and you end up with these Flemish bond and English bond, different ways of bonding a wall together. Today, unfortunately, we're just running bond, and we're forgotten that there's a magic that happens when we put things together like this. This is Carter's Grove in Virginia. The bonding pattern there, in fact, one of the buildings there at the time, and this is another dating thing, is that they would glaze the ends of the brick so that in the sunlight, the building just kind of had this brilliance, almost a mirror effect of what was going on there, all because they kind of glazed the ends of their brick. There's molded brick, there's bonded brick, different ways of doing things. This is called a rubbed brick. And a gauged arch, okay? We started putting gauged brick arches into our brick buildings as a way of giving authenticity and beauty to our buildings. A gauged brick, okay, is basically every one of those bricks in that brick arch above there is a little bit different. It's shaped a little bit different. Actually has to be made either on site or typically at a factory, and we give them our opening, okay? And then we tell them how high we want it to be, and then they're actually making every one of those bricks as it goes across with a different angle, and they send it to us pre-made, and we get to put it up in that position. But that is a gauged brick arch with a molded brick pediment. Okay, how many have done that on their last job? Right, I wish I had, right? There's magic when we look back at how these things used to be made that goes, ooh, that would be fun to copy. Ooh, that would be great. Let's start adding some magic to our buildings and to what's going on. At Colonial Williamsburg, there's an architect named Quinlan Terry. Quinlan Terry is a classical architect out of England. He's older now, he's probably 80. I'm 60, and I'm sitting there going, he's older now. I'm an old man. He did this. This is a new building, okay? And look what he's done there. He's actually made a brick capital with molded bricks. He's got a triglyph in there out of brick. That's awesome. He got dental in his brick. Come on. That's incredible. That's so cool. And then look at this little niche that he did, right? With all these gauge bricks. Look at that how small and thin those little bricks are. And then he's got that cut stone capital. I mean, come on. That is just awesome. Ironwork is another thing. You know, hardware, talk about narrative. My daughter's bought a 1940s fixer-upper in Nashville. And they're like, what is the right hardware for our house? And, you know, hardware is something that you go through these cycles. I remember, 20 years ago, oil rub bronze was the big thing. You'd see it everything, and lighting and faucets and everything else. And so it becomes very faddy, fad-y. And so I'm saying, well, in the colonial period, you either have iron or brass, okay? So, throughout all of those different trendy things, there's a book called The Paradox of Choice, and there's nothing that happens in buildings with our clients today that Paradox of Choice is basically you go and you're trying to pick out hardware and you see this wall of hardware and you're like, how do I choose what's going on? Having a narrative, having a history, you're able to actually go and say, well, look, like I said to my daughters, it's either brass or iron. So don't go picking silver, gold, any of those other trendy things. This is the area you're looking for because you want to make that narrative. The great thing about the pre-industrial era is it's the last era where craftsmanship can really shine, okay? And when you have all these blacksmiths doing different door knockers like this, expressing their ability to craft and their ability to do things, it's kind of that last time when you can really put distinctive features and ideas into your buildings. And so whether it's the strap hinges and the details that go on with the strap hinge on all the different fun ways that those are decorated, realizing that all these things were made by hand, here's some ideas for hardware, right? And when we're doing a Colonial Revival house, we're almost always recommending rim locks. Why? Well, it's historic to that period. It's a distinctive way of communicating wealth, whether you have an iron one with a brass knob or it's all brass and it's a molded rim lock. All of these different things are put together and done to create distinction. The way we used to build gates, these are in Charleston, gives us ideas to how to build better today. So, if you want ideas for stairs, if you want, panels, look to the past. You'll hear me say that on all my videos, but looking to the past, there's just great ideas for us to be building. Second era now is the post-industrial. So industrial revolution is going on. You got the steam engine being invented. And you've got this kind of factory taking place, this kind of factory of how things are built, and realize how everything changes, and even down to the idea of nails. Nails are one of the things at North Bennett Street we used to date, that, wire nails made from wires, right, is a post-1890 deal. And so when you see cut nails, or you see handmade nails, handmade nails are a pre-1820 deal. And cut nails, 1830, 1840, up until about 1890. The way we make nails actually influenced the way we build, because we went from timber framing, and then they invented the balloon framing and the Western framing, all because we now have nails we actually drive things together. So the Industrial Revolution changes the way we build and changes the way we think. It allows for us to build Victorian houses today because you're able to make all these parts and crazy features that you never would have with a timber frame house. So the Victorian era is kind of weird because it's kind of the 70s version of the McMansion. It's just kind of gaudy and over the top. You have the same ideals going on, newfound wealth, dot-com wealth, industrial revolution wealth, these new way of buildings, this fast expansion, growing middle class. And so you have all these different styles, Gothic revival being one of them. This is actually kind of fun. This is up in Maine. That is a federal house remodeled. So that's a Gothic remodel. We probably call it, just a travesty today. But he put Gothic details over a federal house, which is really kind of interesting. Anyway, that's Gothic. Lyndhurst, another famous one. But you don't have interiors like this in a pre-industrial era, because moldings, especially oak moldings and things like that, you never make them by hand because it's just too hard to plane, to shape, and to do those things. But now with machines, we can do all this kind of crazy stuff. And so when I'm looking at a house, if I'm seeing paint grade moldings, I'm almost always knowing it's pre-industrial, because Georgian and federal houses, that's where they were made by hand. They needed to be paint grade, and you get into the Victorian era and you see this explosion of hardwoods now because we can put those things together. So Italianate design, where you see the bracketing and elements like that, the arched windows, towers sometimes are part of that Italian design. Second Empire, the mansard roof, which is kind of the giveaway in that era of how they put those things together. The shingle style, which is a little bit later. This is in Newport. The beginning to get into this, outdoor, wanting to fresh air, wanting things. And on the coast, you begin to see these shingle style houses. This also is in Newport. Romanesque revival. H.H. Richardson kind of put this on the map. Kind of a medieval type of building, medieval type of architecture and construction. And then getting closer to the 1900s, the kind of neoclassical, where you see these strong front porches. There's a house we did in Wichita Falls that was neoclassical, where you start seeing those things together. But you're seeing all of these different influences, all these different world influences. The Chateauesque, which is obviously French, that was the Biltmore. And so what's happening is that as the world expands, as people are starting to travel, as newspapers are starting to be printed because of pulp paper, we're starting to have influences over things, Egyptians things going on because Napoleon went to Egypt, and these world influences affecting Victorian architecture and how it looks. One of my expertise is historic millwork, the rise of commercial millwork, starting with a little town in Dubuque, Iowa, which is just south of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, where all of the white pine lumber is coming down out of those forests, and they set up mills in that area. And you have Dubuque, Iowa was they had more millionaires per capita there because of the lumber industry in the 1860s, 1870s than anywhere in America. And they set up these mills where they're making everything with machine, and they come out with these molding catalogs where you can order things like this. Now with the railroad going on, you can send that millwork all over the country, all over everywhere. They have molding machines like this, which greatly speed up everything that's going on. But there's also standardization. These are two molding catalogs. Notice the cover color is different, but it's basically the exact same molding catalog. One says St. Louis, one says Car Rider. So the same molding catalog is being printed and being sent all over the country because everybody was ordering the same thing. It would arrive on a train car like this and get taken out to a job site. Building is changing because of industrialization, because of how things are being built. Notice the difference that happens. Wood parts, every part of the home is hand hewn or hand sawn, okay? As opposed to by 1890, you're picking it up at a lumber yard, right? You go from hand planing and molding to, I'll take this one. Plans would have been hand drawn by a master builder. Now you can buy plans in Ladies' Home Journal. House plans are all over the country. Timber frame versus balloon frame. Everything's changing. And this was a Greek Revival house in 1850. Now this is a Victorian house in 1890. I mean, just that, guys, is a stark difference about how things are being built. There you see a federal house in 1790, and then you see a courthouse up there in 1869, right? Building is changing. Everything, the way we're doing things is different. Going to the arts and crafts period, 1900 to 1920, the very simple interiors. See a Victorian house. And this was a rejection of that. This is a rejection of the over-ornamentation, a rejection of too much gobbledygook going everywhere. We want simplicity, we want ease, we want honesty. And so the moldings become plain, the hardware becomes plain. It's a simple house, it's an honest construction, honest architecture. And you see this, everyman house being built at this time where house and home ownership becomes something low-pitched roofs, big eaves with bracketed eaves, but also amazing craftsmanship. Anybody been to the Gamble House in Pasadena? Oh my gosh. You guys need to travel. Oh my word. Colonial Williamsburg and the Gamble House. Come on, put it on the list, okay? So the Roby House, the Prairie style movement, basically you have kind of the Gustav Stickley doing the craftsman stuff, the bungalows out in California with Green and Green, and then the Prairie School in Chicago, where it was influencing this kind of modern design and modern construction, linear lines, open floor plans. Frank Lloyd Wright was the first one to really do that. And you see these crazy interiors that he was creating and doing. The horizontality of this, which comes back in the ranch period, okay? So, how influential was he? He's doing this in 1900. It's not till the ranch period that you start to see these ideas again. And then the last period before we go crazy is the period revival, 1920s, 1940s, colonial revival, English revival, Tudor revival, all the different house styles. And really what's happened in this period is a bunch of architects went over to Europe in World War I and were blown away. They're like, I've never seen architecture like this. I've never seen this. This is Samuel Chamberlain went back to England and started sketching these things up. And you begin to see these designs in the houses that were building in the 20s and 30s, influenced by Europe, influenced by that design. An architect we've done a bunch of work for in Dallas. He was probably 20s until the 50s, Charles Dilbeck, very influenced by the French Norman and the French country house and his styles of houses and the kind of things we were doing it. Hollywood was in love with this period, the storybook style, Hansel and Gretel, all of that kind of architecture which was so influential. And we're looking back in Europe, we're looking back at early Tudor houses and going, we want some of that in our houses, or the French timber frame houses, even the Mediterranean revival things that were going on. So, we're looking at Europe and it's affecting our architecture and our houses. Colonial revival becomes a big thing. This is when Mount Vernon Lady Society saves Mount Vernon because it's about to be torn down. This is when Colonial Williamsburg and what's his name? Lost another name. He gets involved and starts restoring. I guess it's a DuPont, restoring Colonial Williamsburg. Basically, they look at Colonial Williamsburg, which had been abandoned for Richmond, and they go, oh my gosh, we got a bunch of great architecture there. Early 1900s, 1920s, you have America, 150-year anniversary at that time. So this enamorment about American society influences our architecture. So here you see that timber framing, and you see these English designs and English details coming together in our houses and how they're being built. So I want you to understand that. I know I'm going through this very fast, but here is when now we get into this third period where everything changes, okay? And I've got a big atom bomb explosion because I'm telling you guys, everything changes, okay? And it's really like a 20-year period that everything happens. Look at the cover of American Builder magazine in 1927. Look at it in 1944. The Great Depression starts in 29, but the housing starts slowing down after 26, okay? You go through the Great Depression, 30s and 40s, World War II starts. Yeah, they actually put a moratorium on building for about a year and a half. You weren't allowed to build a house. This one says how to keep busy in wartime, right? There are articles in these American Builder catalogs, magazines saying, here's what you do. Here's how to find salvage material. Here's how to keep busy. It was a crazy time. There was a 20-year period of time where we stopped building. And the number of housing starts in 26 is like 1 million houses a year. By 1931, it's like less than 100,000, okay? So no houses are being built during this time for about that 20-year period of time. So we come out of World War II and we meet this guy, okay, William Levitt. Levittown, everybody heard of Levittown? Okay, Levittown, basically, William Levitt was the first production builder, okay? He had started out building period revival houses with his dad and brother in Long Island. During World War II, as the build up to World War II, he goes to Virginia and builds Quonset huts at a Virginia boatyard, okay? Housing for these people. Notice what they were built on slabs. They were very small. He could build very cheap and fast. He comes back to New York and is going to build rental housing in about 46, and there is an incredible housing glut, okay? Because remember, 20 years before we hadn't been building. And so now everybody's come, 16 million GIs come back in 1946, and they're all looking for houses. People are doubled up, and the demand for housing is crazy. William Levitt gets on the cover of Time magazine because he starts building houses that are 800 square feet, 600 square feet. The average size house in 27 was about 1,400 square feet. So he's building a very small house on a slab, okay? And people said, they're not gonna sell. Everybody wants a basement. You can't sell this house. They sold by the truckload. I mean, he just blew people away. And he changed the way housing was built. He's part of the problem, but also part of the solution. Because what he did was he basically took the housing process and broke it into 26 steps. And he said, I'm not going to hire carpenters to frame my houses. Instead, I'm going to hire less skilled people, and all they're going to do is frame walls. And then I'm going to have another crew, and all they're going to do is set rafters. He had people walking around with a blue paint bucket and a red paint bucket. I mean, he had it broken down. He was building plumbing trees off-site. It was amazing the way he was doing it. Only 4 house styles, so he's, we talk about cookie cutter, when it's cookie cutter housing starts with William Levitt, okay? And so at his peak, he was doing, a house every 16 minutes kind of thing when he was really going, he's completely vertically integrated. He owned the forest where the trees came from. He knew how many nails went into his house. And he said, I'm not a builder. Didn't want to be known as a builder. I'm a manufacturer. Completely changed the way housing was built. it's amazing kind of the communities and the housing that he's putting together. I mean, his ideal was with baseball parks and your kids never going to have to cross a busy street to go to school, and your shopping centers are going to be right there beside you. And so he basically creates a suburbia. You've heard the term urban flight. That happens because of William Levitt. He starts selling his houses in New York, and people are coming out from they've been living in high-rise apartments and things like that, where they're sharing bathrooms with other families on their floor. They get their own bathroom, their own yard, a carport for the car. He has to teach people how to mow the grass because they didn't know how to mow their grass. It's a complete change of lifestyle. The other thing is that they're paying $90 a month to live in Philadelphia or New York. They're paying $50 a month to buy this house, and you get a yard, and you get a neighborhood, and you get all these different things. People were blown away. There's no wonder he was able to sell so many in such a quick time. There's a Levittown in New Jersey, in outside of Philadelphia, in New York. I think there was 4 altogether. 17,000 houses that sold in like 3 years. I mean, it was just nuts what he was able to do. This is the builder coming up with the solution for the home building crisis, okay? You also have the architect coming up with ideas for the home building crisis. And they're coming up with what's called these case study houses, okay? And these case study houses were houses built and designed to be built very cheaply and fast, basically made in a factory and assembled on your job site. And so, Mies van der Rohe's famous thing in 1950 was not only just a comment on simplicity and minimalism, it was also how to build a house cheap and fast, okay? And so this case study house was an example of one of about 10 houses that were designed and built and put together by architects so that people could solve the housing crisis. Realize that everybody's pushing for building faster and cheaper, okay? Everybody is. Joseph Eichler, if you don't know him, he was building ranch-style houses by the, bucket load, and was very important as far as building houses for the masses, and that's what people were trying to do. I say all this, okay, because what's happening at the same time as design has changed, okay? Not only is the builder and everybody now focused on speed, okay? There was a book written in 1940 called American Housing. It was a study put together by the government. What's wrong with housing? Why can't we build houses like we build cars? Cheap and fast, one after another, off an assembly line. And they looked at housing and they said there's 4 problems. One, builders are regionally localized. They don't move outside of the region. They build 1 to 2 houses a year. They're undercapitalized. They don't need a lot of money to be able to do it. And the 4th thing was they spend too long crafting houses instead of building them in production. So crafting houses was the problem, right? And so this period of time, remember we started with the atom bomb, what's happening to architects and design? Realize that in the 20s, if you hired an architect to design your Mission Revival house, down the street, he was also designing your Mission Revival building downtown, okay? That period revival thing was still going on, was still taking place. Everybody was speaking the same language. By 1950, homeowners want a Levitt house, small little cape, to build a great house in New York City, or a great building in New York City is like the Seagram's building, right? Which now are all over the place. So design has changed, okay? And in a 20-year period of time, construction has changed, design has changed, focus has changed, and now we are, building a different house, okay? Here's that building boom. Look at the little chart down there at the bottom, kind of housing bumping around. Then it just goes this huge, over 2 million houses a year. Between 50 and 70, 60, 69, there's just this rush of houses. That's when Levitt's building so many houses. This is the rise of the production builder. And when he, we have the Centexes and the D.R. Hortons and all those different ones. That business is invented during this time. It is a business that doesn't require design, or as far as architects designing houses. This is much more about production, much more about speed. The cover of these magazines, from the charming, how do we, let's build something beautiful, to now let's build something fast. The articles in the American Builder magazine, the same magazine, is now talking about prefab and modernism and building fast. And so you have a complete change in the way we're thinking about building. Products that are being used. You realize plywood in housing really isn't a thing until after 1950. If you've read the book by Sam Malouf, one of his things he got hired by the government to do was to help people design and build furniture with plywood, okay? And so you have, these products and stuff going into our houses at this time and, becoming this product that can do anything, can be anything. Concrete and concrete blocks. Think about ornamentation. Ornamentation is now, a pre-stamped block, okay, and they have these famous architects like Marcel Breuer, coming up with these designs so that you can have ornament on your house. Picture windows, big wide picture windows become a thing because of technology and glass. Clamshell moldings, right? Hollow core doors. All of these things are changing. How do we build cheaper and faster? The clamshell molding is a anti-classical molding, right? There is no punctuation with that molding. There's no shadow lines. It's just a hump, right? And so things have changed dramatically. You go from wood floors and tile to asphalt and linoleum floors. The thing that's happened, one thing you'll notice if you work on many ranch-style houses is that they're cheap. You don't have slab floors sometimes, but plywood and the 2 1/4 nailed down floor is kind of a thing of the past. A lot of Levitt houses just had asphalt and linoleum floors. Wood sheeting or plaster on the walls to drywall. Tile countertops to plastic to formica, right? All of these things are changing. Wood windows to aluminum, hollow core doors. Building has changed. The architects, design and the building leader. I would argue that the architects. There's a book done in the 1920s, the Architect's Guide for Architecture, which was basically put together by the AIA, and there were small houses designed so people could get beautiful houses when they couldn't afford an architect. And the architect now, it's no longer about building beautiful, it's about building something unique, about building something different. And this progressivism, this desire to build differently means that architects aren't being trained to design small houses, they're being designed to build the city. And things are changing. So you look at the cover of these magazines, there's 27 versus 50. A focus on beauty versus a focus on business. A focus on beauty to a focus on pre-production. And so this is what's happened to our houses. And so there's the Brent Hull rant there. But I say all this because I think this is a huge opportunity for us to be able to bring some of those things back into our building. That's what you're going to see today is basically we're 1908 house. The front of this house is so beautiful, so pretty. When we started building on the back side of it, we said, we want to match what they did in the front of this thing, not what they did on the back of it, because the back, we took off. It was terrible. What does that mean? Well, the columns in the front were cut stone columns, solid pieces of stone, limestone, and they're 18 or 20 feet tall. When we put our rotunda on the back, and that's where I'll be stationed today if you want to talk to me about it, to get those columns, okay, and ours are split because we've got glass going between them, but the first thing that happened when we started talking to the stone company is like, okay, we'll cut you the pieces up and you can lay it up. And we're like, no, we want a solid piece. What? No, we want a solid piece of stone. We want a full thing, but it's not cast stone. This is cut stone. We need it solid. We need it hollowed out in the middle for the steel, and challenging us to build better, to build differently, because that's the way they used to do it. The walls are solid masonry in this house. There are no studs. There's no rot happening with the insulation or the wood in the house. It was built at a higher level. And if we look to the past, as I look to the past, that's what I want us to be. I want us to be inspired by the past, to realize the lessons that they were using to build better, and I want us to build better. Look what's happened with houses. 1920 Craftsman style house, right? You have a philosophy that put that house together. That plain simplicity, that honesty in the construction. The house on the right, 1990s, what is it, okay? It's not a style, right? You got an oriel window and a weird entry and all these different shapes and pieces going on. That's a house, it's a house, like you can sell, it's a house, but there's no design philosophy, there's nothing putting it together. And what style is this? Anyone? Bueller? We call it Plano arches here, where you see these kind of big grand entries that are meant to be showy. There's 2 Palladian windows on that house. 2.
We call it the Texas High.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I mean, it's an ugly house, okay? And so it's unfortunate and frustrating, right? And so just picking pictures of ugly houses. But this is what happened. So when I'm doing my work, most of our remodeling work is on pre-1940 houses. Why? Because after the war, we started building crap, okay? So my fight, and the reason I want us to be master builders, to know how to design, is that's not design, okay? That's assembly, okay? Show me what you want and I'll put it together for you. Go pick out your windows, go pick out your brick, and I'll put it together. That is not the builder I want. I don't want the builder who says, you can't do that, that's going to be too expensive. I want the builder who says, let's figure that out, because that's beautiful, and I love that detail as well. I want a brass ring, guys. I want us to be reaching for that quality and that integrity and that beauty that used to define our housing. And when you get better like that, okay, you begin to open yourself up to a clientele out there you may not be talking to yet. And you open yourself up to a clientele who cares about those things, who are those patrons, and who are, patient and willing to stand beside you as you build something beautiful. Our clients, okay, 30 plus years doing this, finally, probably in the last 10 or 15 years, we've gravitated to the kind of client who wants the same thing we want. And me ranting on the Build Show and on Instagram talking about this stuff, that does attract people to you, okay? And you begin to preach your message and tell your story and do those things. And I guarantee you guys, these people that want beauty are going to start coming to your door. Hey, I saw what you said about that thing. I really want that too. We're building a house, probably be a $10 million house for a guy that's just coming out of the ground right now. And he said, I want to build an important house. I want to build a house that's really special. And, him listening to my videos for 3 years, right, finally said, there is something different. There is something different in what you're doing. And I was always the one who kind of could figure out how to put the houses together, but you're talking about something different. I want to understand what that is. That's the opportunity that I want for you guys, that I want us all to be building better, to understand the past. And for me, it all starts there. I have to be looking to the past, because that's where the best examples for building are. Okay, I think there's an incredible opportunity. I think that it is an art we're pursuing. It is, in realizing too that this used to be, okay, that builders used to guard these secrets that I'm sharing, right? You couldn't look at the pattern book, you couldn't look at the price books that they had, the Carpenters Company in Philadelphia. It was a guarded secret. Thomas Jefferson wanted a copy and they wouldn't give it to him, right? It was something that was very special. We're talking about thousands of years of building that we have a tradition to share, and I want us to be chasing after that and pursuing that. I think it could be higher than 90%, but most builders today are hiring out the work, okay? They don't understand the craft, they don't understand the traditions, and it's just it's a product to them, just to build something fast, get my money, go on down the road. And I want us to pursue this as this storied tradition, this storied profession that builds beautifully, that crafts wonderfully. All right. So, be a learner, okay? Lessons, so if you look back at those master builders we talked about, 7 hours ago. I've been talking for so long. They were travelers, they were learners, they were sharers, okay? They were writing books. Asher Benjamin was the first American author to write American pattern books, okay? In Master Builder, I have people sketching and drawing. I want you to start sketching and drawing. Why? Because if your trim carpenter comes up, how do you want this detail? I want you to be able to draw out what that detail is and it makes sense. I want you to be able to look at something, and sometimes it takes looking at something and going, I'm not sure what they did up there. And as you draw it, you kind of figure it out, and the process of going from your hand to your eye, thinking through it, building it on paper really is powerful. Most great architects that I know all sketch. I mean, we as builders need to be sketching. I want you to be sharing and teaching what you're doing, right? Education is everything that I do with my people. I do it with my customers, I do it with my employees, I'm doing it with you guys. I'm just sharing this information because I think it's valuable and it matters, and I want us to be sharing that stuff. Travel could be the biggest thing, and you guys are not travelers. I know, because I asked 2 simple American places, did you go if you haven't been there? I go to Europe all the time, okay, as many times as I can. I think the greatest buildings in the world were built during that English, country house period of time, where they had the money and the wealth and the taste to put these things together. You guys need to be travelers. You guys need to go, and I don't care where you go, okay? Go to Europe, go to England, go to London, go to France, go to Italy. Go look at these things. You will learn and be inspired, and it'll be awesome. It does take time. It's easy for me to say 30 years, but those were, hard-fought years trying to learn these lessons that Matt and Jake were talking about earlier. I had those same horror stories where you're like, I don't know if we're going to make it, right? It takes time, it takes patience, but it's worth it. Lastly, be kind, right? Share what you know. These are great traditions we need to share. Any questions? Matt, were you going to say something else?
I got some questions for you, Brent.
Oh, okay.
And I bet we have some more in the audience. Am I on?
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you take some audience questions?
What's that?
Why don't you take some audience questions?
Okay.
My name's Adam. I teach kids how to build, but just curious have you studied much of I'm not as nearly, I learned a whole lot today, so I'm not going to pretend that I know things.
Good.
But just curious about master builders from Japanese or Asian cultures, because I am blown away at least by their joinery on.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
On YouTube. So just thinking about the proportions and things like that, but coming from a totally not Western mindset.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually took out one of the slides that actually had the Japanese pagoda that was at the Columbian World Exposition in, 1890s or whatever, in Chicago, the Great White City, if you've read about that. It was a classical city, and in a little island where the Columbian Exposition, the Japanese set up their traditional house, and they brought craftsmen over. It greatly influenced Frank Lloyd Wright. It greatly influenced the Green and Green, the brothers out in California, because they saw these wide eaves that stuck out 4 feet with these timbers and these rafter tails and everything else. And so that design and that kind of architecture was incredibly influential. So, if you look at the way those guys were building, they are practicing some of the things I want us to practice, in that they understand this joinery. I'm not sure there's a finer society, culture with joinery than that Japanese and Asian society, with the way they were building things, the complexity of how they put those things together. The English and French and American versions, because there are the timber framing that we were doing in the 16 and 1700s, is complex and would be very challenging for us today. But I learned craft, right, by looking at that culture. I know that there are proportioning systems that they use, but I don't know what they are. And so it's one of those things. I'm on a journey, and I feel like I'll say this in my keynote tomorrow. my life went through this periods of change and periods of learning in about 10-year periods of preservation, then classicism, now build science. What's the next one, right? It may be going to these other cultures and learning their proportioning systems and stuff. So it's great stuff. It's just a good question. I don't have a clear answer. Any other questions?
Hello, yes, I have one here.
Yeah.
Hi, Brent. My name is Roberto. I noticed you're very passionate about these designs, and it would take us a long time to learn what you know right now. So, as of right now, how can we start applying these classical designs without formal training? You know, like how can we start now? And mostly now where a lot of the buildings are minimalistic, how can we apply those architectural designs into this new era as well?
Well, as far as how to apply them today, I find that our clients are hungry for this information, okay? And I find that me knowing that and sharing that information, I have a story about a client where he added a pedestal chair rail height in their room, only to find out later at a cocktail party, him retelling that story to his friends, right? What happened? I shared a simple idea of, hey, the chair rail needs to be at this height because of this, and then hearing him tell that story again, I think our clients are hungry for this information. Look, we're in the era of the white box and the black windows, okay? Low design, okay? There's not good design there, and people are hungry for something that makes sense, something that isn't cookie cutter, that isn't like everybody else. And so I would encourage you that the more you know, the more you're going to find clients who want this information. As far as what to do, how old are you? 36. So I went to North Bennett State when I was about 26, right? And so I got my period, I'm 60 now, okay? I'm an old man. I'm still learning all the time. I'm still learning every day, and it's awesome, and I love it. And so I don't think that you should look at all the stuff I know and go, oh crap, I'll never be there, because it's such a fun journey learning this stuff. I would start with that Get Your House Right, Marion Casado. It's all about these traditional building methods and how to build porches and windows in a wall and columns and everything else. That's a great start, and just start applying those things, and I think you're on a great path. Other one? Okay, Matt. No, got another one?
Hi, my name is Carl. When you talked about you had a client with a $10 million home, I just thought, well, you know, one of the disappointments with the Build Show is that there's not much content for attainable homes and how to keep, keep it to where it's affordable to the common person. And so what is your client base? Is it the nobility, the upper classes, the patrons? When I first saw your video last year about with those moldings, with the plain molding and the upscale molding, that's what really drew me in. And I thought, oh, it'd be so cool to have a small house, 1,500 square feet, simple design, like they did in the 1920s, but with all this beauty and classical. So is that even practical to think of that, or are we thinking that this is basically for upper class homes?
Yeah, no, I by no means meant to say that this is only something exclusive, right? Because I look at the everyman houses that were built in 1920, and I think that's the model that we could be following today. And so I love the rich, okay? Because they allow me to practice and do things that I can't do otherwise, right? I can't afford me. My house is a little 60s ranch that needs work. So I'm, I can't afford me, but thank goodness for these clients who come along that allow us to put carvings and other things, because I'm beginning to practice then those things I see in other areas and I get excited about. I've got a design team of 8 architects, and we do a lot of consulting all over the country. On my Instagram, those little flip-up things that you might see, that is me helping the everyman. That is me helping, no, you can do these simple things. I think, talking about opportunity, the fact that big builders aren't using design to come up with better housing and better details is astonishing to me. And I think that, God willing, in the next 10 years, we're going to start building small house developments using the past, using the things so that we can make it available to everybody. So I look at the wealthy guys as an opportunity. I look at the bad house and the snout-nosed housing and the houses that are cookie cutter as an opportunity that just bringing good design to building.
I'll piggyback on that. Brent's made a lot of good book recommendations. I've got one for you. Sarah Susanka wrote this series of books called The Not So Big House. I think you maybe even mentioned that without saying the name. There's 3 or 4 of them out now. They're fabulous books, and the whole premise of the book, if you boiled it down to, was, if you've got X amount of dollars in the pot to build a house, but you've been wanting a 3,000 square foot house, well, if you build a 1,500 square foot house and spend the same pot of money, you can do these things that Brent's talking about that really are going to bring the craftsmanship, the life, the soul back into the house. Brent did a whole series of videos called New House, Old Soul. And that's one of the things I think is so attractive about Brent and his videos and his projects is, you go into these houses that maybe are brand new, or maybe you're going to see this afternoon a 100-year-old house. And Brent's built lots of new houses with standard construction methods and drywall and 2x4s or 2x6s that really feel like they were built 100 years ago. And why is that? Because of these principles he's talking about. And so I think that depending on what your budget is, you can actually build a fabulous house, but we should be encouraging our clients to build better, build smaller, and build less affordably, but a lot smaller so it fits within your overall budget. We're going to talk more about that over the next couple days, 2 days, on the business sessions. I know for sure Wade and I are going to jump into that as we talk about pre-construction agreements tomorrow, and how do we talk about price per square foot with builders or with those prospects that come into your office. So that's a great question. I think we need to continue to always talk about that.
100%.
We got another question back here?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. Mike from BC. I guess my question is, we have a very specific architectural style, I guess, that we're seeing in our area. Clients are kind of demanding a very specific look to their buildings. How do you feel geography plays a role in this? You're building in Texas. I've been to South Carolina. I've been to various places that you kind of brought up. And there's a demand for that sort of level of craftsmanship in those areas because they're influenced by that. Are you seeing that sort of desire for that or that influence across the country, and how does geography play into it?
I am seeing design ideas. I mean, Matt and I are what, 100 miles, 200 miles apart, and we build a very different house. The modernism is a much more popular style in Austin than it is in Fort Worth. I think clients want something beautiful, okay? And I think that, so what does that mean? Well, when I'm sharing these ideas with them, sharing even the concept that, hey, it can be beautiful. Well, what does that mean? We would love that. What is it? That's the desire I'm seeing from them. That's the interest I'm seeing. It doesn't have to be classical. It's execution. Really, it's really whatever when you're pursuing those things. It's focused determination for a quality execution in a beautiful way. And so I lean towards the traditional just because that's where my training was and everything else, but I just think people want something beautiful. And we are in an age of ugly where, you can't tell me what's beautiful is because everybody's determined. That's not true. If I got here on a piano and just started banging around, it would sound ugly. But if I started playing chords, it would be beautiful, okay? The same thing is true with architecture and design, and I think there is an absolute out there.
want to give a couple more recommendations, and I wanted to ask you this. This was my question. You know, if you have 3 places in Europe that you think if you've never been overseas before to visit, where are 3 places that you'd recommend?
Well, so I would say that, so one of the places I was enamored by is the Cotswolds in England, because we were building English and Tudor revival houses, but cottagey houses. The scale of the houses are very small there, but why is that place so magical? What is going on there? And studying the towns and studying the street sizes and all those different things helps me appreciate and how to build something more beautiful. I think I would probably just stay in London. I did an arts and crafts tour of there's an architect named Lutyens, Edwin Lutyens, who's world class. He's probably England's greatest architect. And I'm not the only one that thinks that, but he did arts and crafts things. He did high style classical stuff. We went on a tour of his houses, and I would study Lutyens and Gertrude Jekyll, their gardens and their houses together. I'd go to the Cotswolds, and I'd probably just walk around London. Walking around Paris is pretty incredible. So those 2 would be.
Now give us 3 American cities that have some interesting architecture and some tours.
Well, Charleston's probably my
easy to get to.
favorite historic town. The architecture there is unbelievable. Colonial Williamsburg is fantastic. Those 2, but yeah, probably.
What if you wanted to see green and green? Is there some?
Well, in Pasadena, near the Gamble House, which is right looking over the Rose Bowl, there's a walking tour that they've got of green and green houses that you can go walk by 3 or 4 of them. Actually, I think there's 7 there, and I would do that. If you go to Oak Park in Chicago, look at Frank Lloyd Wright stuff. That's interesting.
Cool. I've been there.
Nah, I've never been. Yeah. So those are my answers.
It's funny, almost every town in America has a neighborhood of 100-year-old houses. A lot of them, like I loved your photo of the kind of working class America houses. On the drive to the house that you're gonna see of Brent's, which is a very expensive house, built 100 years ago quite well, you drive through a working class neighborhood of 100-year, 1920s, 1930s, probably 20s houses. That I was asking Brent the other day, and I showed him some photos on the drive. Make sure you take some photos from the bus on the way. You know, probably 10, 15 years ago, those houses were $300,000. And I always remember thinking from Austin, I wish we had some neighborhoods like that. Austin is a relatively new town. We hardly have any old working class neighborhoods from 100 years ago. There just wasn't much industry in Austin, Texas, but there was a lot of industry here in Dallas. In fact, his office in Fort Worth was an old Nabisco kind of distribution factory, and it's a beautiful old building. We don't have a lot of that in Austin. Those same neighborhoods today go for $600,000 or $700,000 here in Fort Worth, which is not affordable, but it's still, for a super well-built 100-year-old house, a very desirable neighborhood. And I think if you kind of look around neighborhoods in America, there's plenty of places like that that you can find these pockets of 100-year-old houses that were built pretty well. They probably had a kitchen remodel. They may or may not have any insulation in the walls. They probably had insulation added to the roof or to the lid at some point. They probably were built without air conditioning, even down here in Texas, if you can believe it. That's all been added later. There's usually photos of window rattlers in old pictures you find of that house. That was the way they air conditioned it from the 1950s, when it was pretty normal to see that. But prior to that, those houses had no AC. And so those houses were built incredibly well. They also lasted really well. They were solid wood. They were old growth lumber. They were real shiplap sheathing on those houses. They had gorgeous wood windows that probably leaked a little bit into the cavities sometimes when they got a blowing wind. On a normal rain, they had 2-foot overhangs. Almost every house in that whole neighborhood has traditional architecture with 2-foot overhangs. So as we look at how builders and master builders of the past built, we realized, hey, we don't have all these skins and membranes and all these fancy building materials, so how are we going to protect the house from Mother Nature? We did it with more classical architecture. And I think that we're going to start seeing that actually come back around, Brent. I wanted to ask you, too, are there other kind of societies? Like, is there a classical architecture society And have you been involved in any of those types
Yep.
of organizations?
So there's the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, ICAA. There's chapters in most big regions. There's a Texas chapter. I was a president of the chapter for a few years. Learned a ton.
I bet.
You can go take classes in New York, or they have these traveling things. They're just proportion, and they'll actually teach you about moldings and scale and columns and how all that stuff goes. That's where I learned. And so, it's not like I just woke up and knew it one day. You have to study this stuff, but it's fascinating. It's fun to learn. Like I was saying to him, each one of those things, you're like, oh, and this light bulb goes off, and it's exciting. I think that if you want to go to another place, going down to Seaside, Florida,
Oh, that's pretty.
those are what's called new urban developments. And new urbanism, another book, Suburban Nation, if you want to read a great book on what happened to housing and why it changed. But those cities that they started building in the 80s and then the 90s are examples of walkability, parking your car, riding your bike, the community kind of being built so that you don't ever have to leave in a car. They're exciting and inspiring communities to go to.
That is really cool. The other thing I want you to think about when you go out to Brent's job site today, I want you to look at the house from the outside when you're walking up and spend some time and maybe ask Brent or whoever's around, hey, what's original on this house? What am I seeing here that was when the house was built, and what am I seeing here that's been, either brand new or that was added in the last 20 or 30 years? I think there's some really interesting things for us to think about as a group of builders and people with a building science mind to go, what is it about this project that's lasted and what's new? This is built in 1908, you're gonna see this afternoon.
Yep.
So this house is 120-ish, not quite years old.
Yep.
And tell us a couple of things on the outside, just because you're in a big group format now, and we can talk about it for a second, you're gonna see that are original in 1908.
Well, the roof's original. How many 120-year-old roofs are there out there?
So it's a tile roof that's
Yeah.
well over 100 years old.
Yeah, it's a Ludovici tile roof. Most of the windows, about 50% of the windows were original. We're actually putting original windows back in. Doors on the front side are all original. Obviously, the cladding, the roof rafters and details are
All the brick on the outside is
Yeah.
original brick.
almost, 95% of it you're going to be looking at from the driveway is original.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I want you to think about that too when you're out there. Like, why did those rafter tails survive this period of time? Why did all the windows in the second floor original? Why did those windows survive? What is it about that tile roof that was different than a roof that we put in our
Well,
houses
and
today?
two, just am I building my houses so they'll be here in 100 years, 120 years? That's
Yeah.
our goal, right? And so what do I have to do in order to make that happen? Do you build the wall out of solid masonry? I'm still waiting for that client, right, who will let me do that, but that'd be fun, right? I'd
That would
learn
be
a
really
lot
cool.
doing that. So
Triple wide masonry. We have 10 minutes, and speaking of things that last, while we're here and we got a big group setting and your window's up on stage here, give us a couple details on this. And we probably have a 2-hour session on this. We're going to give a 10-minute session, but I'm curious, Brent. You started this window, basically brand, the 100-year window, and that's a pretty bold statement to say that something might be around for 100 years.
Well, it's funny you say that. You're the one who started this thing.
Really? I didn't know this, Brent.
You came and saw the window and you go, this is incredible. You ought to be building it. I was like, ding. Wait a minute. What was happening is we were working on, I've got 3 companies. I got a millwork and restoration company, I got a building company, and then I got a design group. The restoration company does courthouses, depots, 100-year buildings where we'll take the windows out, restore the millwork, and put it back in. And we're restoring 100-year windows all the time. On the build side, we were putting in production windows that literally started failing 15 to 20 years into their deal. And so we're like, wait a minute, why are we restoring and putting those windows back into 100-year-old buildings, and these windows aren't lasting 20 years? And we realized that the change that's happened, wood quality, build details, drip edges, all these different things that used to be part of how windows were put together, old growth wood, are no longer available. So we said, well, if we built it like they used to build it, our windows should last 100 years because we're copying them, right? So again, Brent looking at the past, trying to figure out how to build. So that's where all this comes from. No plastic, weather stripping's all, sprung bronze, solid brass hardware, all things that are going to last a long time. The other thing we don't do, which isn't going to go over well with this group, is I can't put insulated glass in there because insulated glass is a 20-year product. And if I want it to last 100 years, I need to have insulated single pane glass. So we will get by with storms to get to the energy rating we need, or we just won't sell it because I want to build a 100-year window and I can't do it with insulated glass.
So if we can't get old growth lumber anymore, and that's painted wood, what are you using for wood?
So we're using red grandis, which is eucalyptus. We're using sapele, and is the main things. We've just started going over, you might have seen some of my videos on linseed paint. And linseed paint actually is a vapor open paint that if the wood gets wet, it allows it to dry. And so we think that is a big deal. It's going to help us, and you don't have to use super expensive woods because your paint is a better quality paint. So all of our windows now are being painted with linseed paint.
Is that what we were using 100 years ago when we had
in fact, the formulas
lumber?
for this company, he's getting these formulas from the 1780s and 1820s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. So
Yeah,
that's
really, it's just like with architecture changing after World War II, so did paints. And that's when lead started being used, and they started changing the components in there because of the science, and paints become much more plastic as we come forward, and less, oils and vapor open pieces that would allow it to last longer.
You guys are all invited after we finish up on stage to check out this 100-year window, to touch it and feel it. This is a casement.
Yep.
Can we operate it too?
Yep.
And it's a latch, and talk to us about the brass hardware that's on
It's called a casement stay. And so basically it allows you to open the window and kind of lock it down so it doesn't go slam or things
So
like
it's
that.
not the casement that we think of in modern day.
No, it's not a crank casement. No, it's a casement stay. And then it's just a lift latch.
And are you selling those all over the U.S. to various people that are building new or remodeling?
Yep, we're all over the country. Did one on Block Island, Rhode Island. Did we've Missouri, Connecticut, Ohio. Yeah, all over the place.
Made right here in Fort Worth, Texas.
Right. That's right.
You should go check out some of Brent's videos about his mill shop. He's got 40 craftsmen or so there.
35.
Just doing some amazing work, and Brent's got a ton of videos on that. If this is your first time seeing Brent, make sure you get over to thebuildshow.com and check out his videos. I got to take a bathroom break. I don't know about y'all, and I bet you are tired of talking after 2 hours. We've got luncheon set up for you guys. The lunch is, my understanding, is right through those doors. It'll be set up through there. That's going to start at 11, and then we're actually coming back here to eat. So these tables are your eating tables. And if you weren't here for our morning seminar, I want you to get to know the people at your table. This may be a new group of folks to you, but you should get to know these folks because we have 2 fabulous tours after lunch today. The bus is board at noon, I believe. Tell me anybody if I'm wrong on that. And I believe the boarding is going to be straight through those doors and downstairs. Is that correct? Anybody on my team? No one said no, so that must be it. And we've got until noon. So you guys have a break for a bathroom. We've got lunch. Make sure you get to know some people at your table. Brent and I will be hanging out after we hit the bathroom as well, and check out the 100-year window. That being said, let's give Brent a big thanks.